think you were one of the first companies in technology to use user feedback. I mean, way back when, I remember reading about you guys building labs and watching people use it and improve it, etc. So in what way was your background from the consumer side influence your entry into technology?
I wasn't very inventive. What I did was pick up a set of tools that we learned at P&G of how to build consumer products and apply them in a field where they'd never been applied. Tom and I got together and started working on this in 1983. And at that time, software was just built and released. Nobody thought of design or the customer, what you were trying to achieve. No one tested. No one looked to see how people were using it. So we were the first to do what is now called usability testing. We were really tiny and poor, so we didn't have any money, so we went to the local junior league chapter, which are women who weren't working, so they were available during the day. At that point, in 83 and 4, they didn't own computers. We had them come in, and we'd give them the software on a computer and ask them to do the simplest things, and then watch. And we thought the product was great, easy, we understood it, but they didn't. They'd stumble and fumble, and so we'd take notes, and we'd ask them, what were you thinking? And then we'd go back and we'd change it. And then we'd do the cycle again. And that's part of what we did to build both a product but then a company that was all focused on how do we delight customers, even customers very different from ourselves who don't have any background on the technology.
You know, the kind of a different thinking that you brought to technology is also something you're known to have brought to leadership. You know, your very radical views on leadership. Can you explain a little bit about that?
As the company grew and became larger and successful, I noticed some patterns I didn't like about the way the hierarchies work in successful companies. Most game-changing ideas were out of the norm, out of the mindset of the leaders. Difference of opinion between a young person with a radical idea and a bunch of stakeholders, well, you know who's going to lose. What you'd think with all that review and PowerPoint analysis and decisions and smart people, smart executives, those decisions would be really good. You had to change how the actual decisions are made. So I saw a pattern elsewhere, and so we've moved to something I call decision by experiment. An experiment is where you set things up so that you test a leap of faith assumption. This is that great word from Eric Ries, where the customer thinks it's real. And they're making a real decision for reality with real money in the real world, but it's a prototype.
You want to give us an example of something you guys tried?
Okay. We're in the payroll business. We, in the U.S., have about a little over 1 million businesses who use us to do their payroll, to do all the withholdings and taxes, all that stuff that comes out of a paycheck, and do the filings with the government and pay the employee. That startup, there was an engineer who had an idea before we acquired him. The idea was that something about 2/3 of the people of the new prospects who come to our website seeking to sign up for payroll come on payday, meaning they want checks now, within 20 minutes. But the reality is, on our site, everybody else's, and all our competitors, it can take hours or a day before your setup is done, before you can get paychecks. And that's the way it's always been. Well, he had the idea, well, let's flip that. Let's allow a brand new user to cut paychecks first, in minutes, and then we'll do the setup later and correct any mistakes or errors and adjust. He pitched that idea to his startup. In fact, he even pitched it showing a screenshot, and to scare them, he put our name on the screenshot saying, this is what our competitor, Intuit, could do to us. Fast forward, we acquire the company. He's now in Intuit. We've got an experimentation culture now that we've been working to develop. And so he and a product manager groomed this up and tested this idea, not with a real experiment, but in a survey with 20 customers. And they all said no, they wouldn't use it. 0 for 20. But that wasn't a real experiment. That was a survey. So they got encouraged to run the real experiment. So in a day, they mocked up a dry test, which gave the brand new prospect a choice. Set up like normal, or pay employees first. 58% chose pay employees first, despite 0% saying they'd do it in a survey. And that was a dry test, so we didn't have the code behind it, but we now had the learning. They built the rest, and millions of extra revenue, 14% higher conversion rate, all because he had this idea coming from a customer problem, And finally, he had the freedom to explore and to experiment with real customers.
And part of it, as I think, is that when a young person comes up with an idea, you feel that it's just not experienced enough, and so it may not be taken seriously. But if you can have a system where anyone can come to a certain level and try it, then basically what you're saying is that whether you're young or a senior manager, it doesn't matter.
Right.
But can you make really important decisions that can stake your company one way or the other in that way? Have you ever had to do that?
Yeah, I'd say the more important the decision, the more important it is to run the experiment first, except in an emergency. We've done that here in India. We have a operation in Bangalore that makes build software for the entire world for us, but also is charged with the goal of inventing the new businesses that will improve the lives of Indian citizens. But we also allowed teams to experiment on their own. So this team went out and immersed themselves with farm families. They went to the families, into their homes, into the fields, into the mandis where they sell their crops, and they found a problem. The idea was that the farmer doesn't know where to take their goods to get the best price. Do they go to the mandi to the north or to the mandi in the village to the south? And once they get there, which agent do they sell their goods to? As a result, it didn't appear the farmers were getting the best price. So this idea is, well, let's get the best prices, or get the prices from the mandi agents, send them out on to the farmers' cell phones. This was an idea that the management, the hierarchy didn't like. We'd never done anything with farmers. The farmers can't read. I have to admit that I did not think it would work. I did not think the agents would give us the data on a continuing basis, the price data, which was needed to make it work. But the team had the license to experiment. And they did. They cooked up a quick experiment to test the idea.
So when they experiment, you give them some budget to experiment?
In this case, it was just really the freedom of time they needed.
The time of
because part of our goal here is to drive the cost of experimentation so cheap and enable the experiments to be done so rapidly that then anyone can run them. Not always that good, but in this case, they could run a very cheap experiment. They did what we call a kind of FACO back end, or Wizard of Oz. So they hand collected, our employees, price data from 5 mandi agents. They signed up 15 farmers, and then they hand texted the information out, the farm prices. So we didn't have to build any code. So it was a free test, basically. And then watch the behavior. Did the farmers actually read the messages? Did they act on them? Did the mandi agents honor the prices that they had said earlier that day? Did it result in the farmer thinking they'd saved money or made money, higher prices? And it looked like it worked. This quick little test.
So what were the results? What percent of the farmers read them? What percent of the farmers used them?
The team's going-in expectation was 10%. We make every team, before the test, you have to come up with a numeric hypothesis, basically applying the scientific method. So 10% was the going-in hypothesis. The actual number that they measured was 21%. So stunningly better than we expected. And the vast majority of farmers said, yes, we got that. Now we had to figure out how to make it economic, how to sign up farmers, and so the team continued to do a whole bunch of experiments. One test was can we use third-party agents, contractors, that we hire to go sign up farmers? At the end of the test period, in fact, there were 33,000 farmer names submitted by the contractors, so it looked good, until we started sending them the price information. And then the farmers called up saying, wow, what is this? Wow. Because the contractors had cheated us. They had just signed up bogus farmers that didn't meet our specs and didn't bother to ask the farmer. We had given them specs that we had intended this for farmers of perishables, because they're under the most price pressure. If they don't sell their stuff, it rots. We did not think it would work for farmers who made durable or long-lived grains, because grains are storable. Well, these contractors had willy-nilly signed up any farmers, and a bunch of them were grain farmers, and some of those farmers kept using the service. In fact, the grain farmers liked it just as much as the perishable farmers. So through getting cheated, we got a surprise that in fact the market was 3 times bigger than we had known.
And so in all this, I mean, you have over 1 million farmers on this now,
1.6 million farmers.
Yeah. It sounds like a fantastic story, but what were some of the tough times? I mean, was there ever things that made you guys question or continue that? Is it always a bed of roses? Tell me a little bit about the tough times.
And there is one area where we have regularly failed. We have now gotten the farmers report an increase. Now it's 14% in the price they get, which after cost of goods, if you look at their bottom line, their take-home pay is about 18% increase in their take-home pay. The thing we haven't been able to get to work is monetization. So we've tried charging the farmers, and the hypothesis was that 20% of farmers would pay, and we surveyed them. 40% said they'd pay. Sounds good. We ran the experiment. 2% paid. So
But was the pay, what you were asking them to pay, way less than 18%?
It's tiny. We had a couple of price tests, and the results were equally bad at both price levels. It was small. We've tried getting back-end advertising, lead gen, and all that. We've actually not been able to get a revenue model yet that can work. So this is not a story that's all roses. And so we're actually now trying to find some firm who already deals with farmers in India, or the low end of the bottom end of the pyramid, the broad end of the pyramid, who already has a revenue model, and this could then give them the preeminent communication method.
Like a monthly subscription that they would sign up for, or something like that, or per transaction?
Or it could be somebody who's in agricultural chemicals, or seeds, or financial services. Somebody who wants to have a connection, particularly to farmers right at the time when they have the most money of the year, which is harvest time. And which is when these messages are read and used.
So is this part of your P&L, or is it part of your corporate social responsibility? Where does this experiment fall?
Yeah, that the big social problems in the world are so big, it's hard to do them with your pinky to fix them. They're resistant to change. That's why they're problems. This is intended to be a profit-making business. We don't need a lot of profits from it, but that's what can keep us going, is if we can find a way to make it a profit-making business. We have another one also targeted at the broad population in the developing world, which turns your feature phone into a pull system where you can pull information. SMS normally is a push system where information gets pushed to you, whether you want it or not. The web is wonderful because you can pull what you want when you want it. But SMS has never worked that way. So we've put a layer on a platform called TextWeb that allows people to pull the information they want when they want it. We now know what information Indians most seek.
Tell us about it.
We now know.
You're not getting to the answer.
There is one thing far more than anything else I've now learned. It's the source of truth and enlightenment in India.
Does it have any... And please, now with a drum roll.
I bet the audience can guess. It's cricket scores.
So as a wrap-up question, Scott, you have a personal foundation, and you and your family, there are some issues that are close to you. Just share with me quickly.
We're trying to find those world-transforming innovations and places where change needs to be catalyzed by a relatively small amount of energy, money. So an example is my wife found a medical technology that was about to shut down. There were 3 researchers at the University of Wisconsin. They thought they had figured out a general way to help people recover from neurological issues, multiple sclerosis, brainstem injury, traumatic blast, through no drugs, electrical stimulation of the tongue while doing the thing you want to do to reprogram brain plasticity. But no one believed it. I didn't believe it when I first heard tongue. What? That's a crock. But it turns out they had done a test with 10 patients, all of whom had no treatment had worked, and this was in the MS field, and all 10 had gotten hugely better. But the money had run out, and they were about to shut down. So we gave them a small amount of money, $100,000, so that they could scale up from a 10-person, one-sided trial into a better trial with a larger group. And then that was enough to inspire others, which inspired others. We gave them a little more money. Others came in, and now DARPA is about to do a giant grant because of traumatic blast injury for soldiers returning from war fronts. Celebrities have got involved, and the thing is now, and it really does work. And it's so cheap that it could work across the world. This could be mass-produced for like $10. That's the kind of transforming. When Saul Khan was about to go back to Wall Street, Ann Dorr stepped in and gave him money so he didn't have to go back to Wall Street. That's a catalyzing gift that's now transforming education. And we followed that, and we were the money behind that allowed Saul and Shantanu to stop fundraising every week so they could actually focus on education. And the ability of online education like that to change the world, just the beginning.
Thank you very much, Scott.